Hi, this is Jeff Zeig, and the founder and the director of the Milton Erickson Foundation. I'm here in our offices in Phoenix, Arizona, and this series, it's stories of Milton Erickson, stories that have appeared in some of the books that I've written, but I'm recounting them for those of you who would prefer to see me tell them and hear them. And some of the books are difficult to get at this point. When I first visited Dr. Erickson, this was 1973, he really wasn't that popular. He was well known, of course, in hypnosis circles, but it was in 1973 that Jay Haley published a very important book, Uncommon Therapy, which was a summary of some of Dr. Erickson's cases presented intelligently within a family life cycle. Haley noticed that problems often group at transition points in the life cycle of a family, and he grouped Erickson's cases, for example, when a child is born, when the child goes to school, etc. And that's an important book for you to read. And that contains many of Dr. Erickson's teaching stories, many of the cases that he used. I'm reflecting here about more of the personal things that I was privy to in the time that I spent with Dr. Erickson. So at first, because Dr. Erickson wasn't popular, it was only when Haley, Bandler and Grinder, Ernest Rossi started publishing widely about Dr. Erickson's work that he became more popular. So at first, when I visited him, it was just me and Dr. Erickson. Well, there weren't really videos of Dr. Erickson. There were some old films that existed of Dr. Erickson doing hypnosis and inductions, but there wasn't any contemporary video, and this wasn't a time when video was very popular. I brought a friend of mine, Paul, and we wanted to make some of the earliest videos of Dr. Erickson. Now, this was using reel-to-reel equipment. Video cassettes weren't invented at the time, and the microphone was big and bulky, and it was bringing a lot of equipment from California to Phoenix to make this recording. I was personally a little ambivalent because, one, I loved the time that I was having alone with Dr. Erickson. It was such a privilege. Two, I wanted the videotapes, and finally the videotapes won out. And Paul was a very good hypnotic subject. He was one of the people at one time who had been a roommate in a communal living setting. And we made a videotape of Erickson hypnotizing Paul as a relatively naive hypnotic subject. And it was a masterpiece. It was a marvelous video, and I felt justified in citing to get the videotapes rather than having the personal time solely with Dr. Erickson. And then when Paul and I went to view the video of the session, there was no sound. Now, Paul was more expert at video, but certainly I knew enough about video at the time, and I was immaturely blaming Paul that it was his fault that he forgot to plug in the microphone. Dr. Erickson reminded me that I knew enough about video, but I was still immature, and I was unfortunately blaming Paul. So the next day when we went in for the session, Dr. Erickson said, "Jeff, put on that silent film." And I put on the silent video, and Paul was sitting in the green chair, the client's chair. Dr. Erickson looked at Paul expectantly. Paul looked at the video, the silent video that was playing on the monitor. Dr. Erickson looked at Paul expectantly. Paul looked at the video. Dr. Erickson looked at Paul expectantly. Paul went into a trance. Now, I didn't understand it at the time, but if you sequentially revivify a previous trance, you have a current trance, and that was an interesting learning. And so I got busy setting up the video equipment, and Paul got out of the chair where he was sitting with his right arm, his good arm, cataleptic against his side, walked mechanically across the room, tested the microphone plug, walked back, sat down, and said to Dr. Erickson in a hypnotic voice, "I'd like you to teach me more things in this state." And then we started videotaping, and Dr. Erickson as a conceptual communicator, was communicating indirectly. And so he was talking to me, the cameraman, about some of the changes that happened with Paul. And Dr. Erickson said, I can't see, but it seems that now his blink reflex has changed. And Paul closed his eyes. And later Dr. Erickson said, when did Paul close his eyes? And I said, I don't know. I was preoccupied with being the cameraman. And Dr. Erickson said, well, Paul closed his eyes when I mentioned the absent blink reflex. Well, Paul was curious, and I became curious, and so we viewed the videotape after the video was made. And actually, Paul didn't close his eyes when Dr. Erickson mentioned the absent blink reflex. Paul closed his eyes when Dr. Erickson said, I can't see. Now, in English, I, the possessive personal pronoun, and EYE, are both pronounced the same. And Paul heard I can't see as an embedded suggestion and what could be called an embedded command, and closed his eyes. Paul was very sensitive, responsive to the nuances in communication. Well, suddenly the silent videotape had incredible value, and my being disappointed, immaturely, about the situation wasn't warranted. Dr. Erickson, in his customary utilization state, there must be something useful, and he found a way to make the silent video useful and to demonstrate his process of utilization, the use of expectations, and something about interpersonal responsiveness. So then it turned out to be a marvelous event. And also I learned something about the way in which hypnotic subjects can respond. The way that Paul had his arm cataleptic against his side was something that was terribly unusual, and it was something that I hadn't seen before. But I've learned to look for asymmetries which could be customary to any particular person and that person's style of going into trance. So all in all, my ambivalence about giving up some personal time with Dr. Erickson in order to make some of the earliest videotapes of Dr. Erickson was justified, and I'm certainly glad I did it, and also grateful to Paul for his contribution that made that possible. This is Jeff Zeig. Here I am in Phoenix, Arizona at the office of the Milton Erickson Foundation with stories about Dr. Erickson.